this open-minded approach to training is what's going to deem functional training for you, right? So just understand function it's serving an outcome, right? And whatever that outcome means or is to you, whatever that goal is, the dots, the two kind of spaces between this dot, that is the functional training that you are doing. And that functional training can look different for a lot of people. All right, what is up, everybody? Episode 56 of Pursuit of Balance. We're going to talk about functional training and what does that mean for each individual? Is it bullshit? And why do so many people like to hate on it on the internet? And of course, I'm going to dive into it because, I got a business name named Functional Lifestyle, and I think I'm someone that preaches functionality more than anything in life. So this conversation, I really kind of want it to be a little bit, I would guess, more insight towards like, what does it actually mean for each individual? Because I was having this conversation with a Fit Start a few weeks ago, and he's like, well, how would you describe functional training? And I'm like, well, I think that's subjective, I think it's different for everyone. I think a lot of times we put a definition on things and we like to just like pigeonhole it to one thing. When the reality is like, if you look at it in a little bit more of an open-minded lens, like it could be whatever you want it to be, right? So my answer to that question when I receive it is functional training is dependent on the outcome of what I am trying to do or serve for that person, right? So if I'm working with a client and their number one goal is like, hey, I just want to look better. I want to build my legs. I want to have bigger shoulders. I want to have flatter abs, whatever it might be, right? Then something like bodybuilding by definition is considered functional training, right? It's funny when for me, I think my training journey has obviously gone through different chapters, right? So before I would even start training, I would actually put sports into this. So like extreme sports and sports were always the thing that kind of kept me active all the way up till probably, I don't think I really got into the gym till probably like 16. So a lot of my quote unquote function was just the sport itself, right? And that is something I do say all the time too. And it doesn't matter if I'm talking to somebody with mobility of like, what's the best thing that I can do or best stretch or best mobility drill for a squat? And I'm like, squats. Like if you could spend more time in a squat in the bottom of a squat, your body will go through an adaptation to become good at it, right? It's like, well, what's the best type of training for my sport? If I want to be better at baseball, I want to be better at football, I want to be better at whatever I'm playing. It's like, well, it's the sport itself, because the skills inside of what you're doing day in, day out at practice and games and things like that is what gets you good at it. Now, there's all these other supporting casts, right? So I always like to think about training and a strength and conditioning programming kind of being the supporting cast, right? So it's like, a band or a singing is great, but like having it with drums and having it with guitar and having it with jazz, like all these other supporting casts is what makes music great. Not that a solo on a good voice is not, but so I always look at training as that. It's like, yes, there are things that could have supporting things towards it. When I got out of sports and I started just kind of being more into just training alone as kind of my physical aspect of life, it was like, okay, I started off with more bodybuilding. Your typical, like, we're doing chest and tries, we're doing back and buys, we're doing legs today, we're going to do some shoulders and core, and just going through your typical, what most people would deem as your bro splits. And then my next chapter was CrossFit, and CrossFit was very performance-centric of how strong, how fast, how skillful can I get in gymnastics or whatever that kind of might be. So just really building an aerobic engine, building strength, and building the skill sets behind it. And then I kind of went back into, men's physique a little bit, but really that was where a transition of like, okay, I like bodybuilding because I like looking good. I do like performance-based training because I just like the competitive aspect of it. And I also I think I like the end results of just focusing more on performance. But, inside of that CrossFit chapter, I had a little handful of injuries between my back and my knee and kind of shoulder things. And, I screwed myself up in sports plenty of times too. So I'm sure those things just kind of compounded back. And that's where I got into this more corrective exercise, right? And which kind of leads me to like the functional lifestyles and functional training in general. I was like, okay, well, like there's got to be a way to be able to do all these things, right? There's got to be a way to like improve someone's performance, but also like improve the way they move. So for me, when I first opened up the gym, I was like, functional training is the best way to train, right? And I've kind of, as I've matured and gotten older, realized I don't like the absolutes to life, right? Like there's not just one way to do something. There's many ways to do things. And I've always liked this, what I call like the open source model of living, of like, hey, like be able to like have other people's inputs and other ideologies and other methods and other kind of strategies to life, training, etc. And I think functional training for me has kind of become a little bit more open-minded as well, where I'm like, hey, like coming back to that original statement, if I want to look good, bodybuilding in a machine is a great thing, right? What I used to always say is like, we don't use machines here because your body's the machine, right? And I want you to develop the functionality of like building the range, building the stability, building the coordination, things like that. But if I have someone that's like, hey, I want to be a better runner, I want to get ready for high rocks. Like we were just talking to somebody in the gym yesterday. It's like, well, I'm getting ready for a high rocks competition. It's like, okay, great. Like you need to build an aerobic engine, right? Like you need to be really, really phenomenal at running. And then we just need to develop the other skills that are going to be, well, I wouldn't say high rocks has a lot of skills. That is the whole purpose of high rocks, but we need to build the engine, and then we need to master some of the movements of your wall balls, your skiers, your rowers, your carries, your lunges, your burpee broad jumps, etc. But at the end of it, like it's really just a foundation of your engine. But then I have people that are in their 40s and 50s, and it's a huge chunk of our demographic that are like, hey, I want to be able to play with my kids and keep up with them with sports, and still go skiing in the winter or go out in the boat in the summertime, paddleboard. I want to be able to get off the floor. I don't want to be in pain. I want to improve my posture. And it's like for them, it's like, okay, yeah, end range isometrics, mobility training, not just making it just part of a warm up, but making it a bigger part of their actual programming would be deemed as their function, right? So that's kind of where I like to really frame the mindset for people, that like functional training is not just one thing. There's a lot of people, and I will say there's this, I don't know what I would call it, I guess methodology or training style. This guy's name is Naughty, and he has a company called Functional Patterns, right? And it's some pretty like out there shit, but I do like his core concept that like when you think about this term function, I think one of the most functional things that a human can do is a bipedal creature is like the aspect of gait, right? Learning how to walk correctly, jog, run, sprint, etc. But then there's things like being able to carry, being able to throw, blah, 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 right? And in the strength and conditioning world or movement world, we generally kind of go off 7 different patterns of movement, right? There's gait, which is like we just talked about, your walking, jogging, sprinting. Then there's push mechanics, right? So your bench presses, your push-ups, your shoulder press, your handstand push-ups, whatever that might be. There's pull, both horizontal and vertical once again. But then we have hinge, then we have squats, then we have lunge, and then we have rotation and twist. And for me, when it comes to the programming aspect of thinking about something that's deemed as more functional, I try to balance out these 7 patterns, right? Because I think these are going to be things that are going to show up in real life. And also, more importantly, when we think about the mobility and movement side of it, are going to be the things that keep us a little bit more well-rounded. And when you think about carrying, that might be something that's going to be in the gait aspect of things, right? If you think about throwing a punch or throwing, right, that could be in the more push orientation of things. So there's obviously some gray area when you kind of think about some of the fundamentals of these movements. But for me, that was always kind of like how I approached functional training, right? It was like, okay, like number one, I think I always put functional training at just the foundation of movement. And coming back to the functional patterns guy, like he is just one of those guys that's just, I think, ruined it for all functional people, because like in my industry, and I think the nutrition, well, there's a lot of industries that exist this way. The hard part about digesting information as a consumer is you have to remember that people are going to be very closed-minded to have conviction around their product or service or approach or method or whatever it might be, right? So it's a very normal thing in the marketing world for people to just say, this is the best way to do it, right? Eventually I'll talk on this with a podcast, but I have like a podcast idea that's been in my notes for a while, where it's just like anything that has a name on your diet is probably not a good approach, right? This kind of comes back to the same strategy here, where it's like, if your way of training is the only way to be successful at training, like that's bullshit. Like that's not true. There's plenty of ways for people to train that can still be successful and still achieve a degree of goal. We want to find something that's more sustainable, that's more enjoyable, that's more specific to someone's outcome or goal, things like that. So whatever. Coming back to like the strength and conditioning people on the internet, it's funny because I see it a lot now. Everyone's just like talking shit about like, oh, if it's got the word functional in the programming, it's probably a load of bullshit because they're just using it as a marketing terminology. And I'm like, I can see that, like I can see how people be like, oh, this is functional training. And it's like people think about balancing on a Bosu ball and doing some weird movements and things like that. So I do agree that it can get out of hand. And I will say like that is even something I see in the gym. Like I remember When I worked at Equinox, I'm gonna forget her name, but she was just like always doing this one coach, and she would always do like these crazy movements, like have her clients balance on like a Swiss ball, like as they're throwing or as they're juggling, and like, things that just seem like, okay, this is gonna be phenomenal for balance and phenomenal for coordination. But I always like to look at it as like, what's the carryover, right? Like, what is the ROI for someone's, life on what they're trying to actually fix on? And it's like, is it important for everyone to work on stability? Yeah. Is it important for everyone to have a degree of coordination? Yeah. I talked on this probably a few months ago when I was talking about like our athletic performance cycle. And I get a lot of pushback sometimes with clients of like, what's the purpose of this? Like, what's the point of me doing an agility ladder? What's the point of me doing something that maybe involves a degree of coordination or it's a little bit more dynamic? And I'm like, hey, like as we get older, these are things that we lose. These are skills that we lose. They do have carryover because like, you kick your foot on a curb. I want you to be able to catch yourself. I want reaction time. I want coordination, right? You want to go play with your kids or go be active outside of the gym. Like those are all elements and foundations that will make you successful at those things or better the likelihood of reducing injury and improving performance, et cetera, et cetera. So whatever, like that's my original kind of frame and take on that, right? But I always like to come back also to the other aspect of it is like, what are the universal layers, right? Like, what are the things that I think when we think about this term functional, what are the things that I think everyone, no matter their sport, no matter their outcome or goal or training kind of philosophy, what are the things that are going to be kind of parallels, right? What are things that we all should improve on, right? What are things that are just going to benefit all of humanity? Because for me, I remember this in the beginning. It was just like, and this, I think, and for anybody that's in business, it's always important to just like understand like who is your target demographic, right? Because like in the marketing world, it's like if I'm just giving a message for everyone, I'm attracting no one. If I give a message for that 45-year-old mom that has 2 kids that's struggling to be consistent, that doesn't have motivation, that is a very hyper-specific kind of targeting as far as my messaging goes, and it's way more successful in the marketing world. So I remember in the beginning, I was always like, well, people would be like, okay, well, like, what is this going to be? Or who is this for? What's the best? What's your ideal client? Even when I was, when I lost my original investor and I like talked to a handful of people that were just like clients and people that I knew that were either investors or had a degree of money. They asked me that question. I'm like, oh, this is for everyone, And that was just like 25-year-old Corey being like, yeah, I mean, like who doesn't benefit from functional training, right? It's like you move better, you get stronger, you look better, like you improve your conditioning levels, you get leaner. Like who the fuck doesn't want all those things, right? So that's really what I want to focus on in this section of this episode of like, what are kind of the universal layers, like I said. So for like me, it's like, I definitely think about like, okay, breathing mechanics is something that just like always pops up in my mind. Like we take tens of thousands of breaths every single day, right? So getting someone to understand how to properly breathe, to improve their posture, to improve their stability for lifting, to reduce stress, things like that. Like I would put that, what we would think about is like some people think like, oh, that's more functional. It's a little more woohoo. Like who needs to practice breathing? Because we think it's just an involuntary thing like it is, but most people don't know how to do it, right? A second thing is I also think about like this idea of gaits, right? I think the reason why so many quote unquote functional gurus like to talk about gaits, walking, how you walk, how you run, how you sprint is because like we are as humans bipedal creatures that are consistently taking steps every day. And most people are not taught the right way to run, right? I use this stat a lot, but like 8 out of 10 runners deal with injuries from running. And there's a lot of context to everything as always, right? That could be a volume problem. That could be how we're programming. That could be I don't have the mobility or stability to do so. Or it could just be I don't have the coordination because I've never been taught the proper gait, right? I did track. I did cross country when I was in school. And like I did a lot of running things and running sports. And I will say that like I couldn't tell you that how many times we were actually taught mechanically what is the correct way to run, right? So I always put like gait kind of the foundation. Another aspect is thinking about multi-directional movements, right? And this, I think a lot of times my athlete brain just always thinks that this is such an important thing because like when I go swing a golf club this weekend for a golf tournament, it's like, yeah, I need to be able to rotate. So why would I not expose myself to that range of motion or that plane of motion in my training? But then it's like, well, think about the parents, right? Think about that person that's bending over, that's twisting, that's trying to grab their kid out of a car seat, that's already got a bag or a purse in their hand. Like, there's weird loading mechanics and there's weird positions that life will expose us to. And if all of your training is very linear by nature, then for me, I deem that as not something that's as functional, right? Like, is that going to make you a better bodybuilder by rotating? Maybe to a degree with some oblique training, but for the most part, no. It's like your sport doesn't really require that, right? When you think about high rocks, right? High rocks is obviously the new thing. It's like everyone likes to talk about high rocks and how they're training for it, but it's like, is rotation and lateral movement going to make you a better high rocks athlete? And it's like, well, no. It's like, I don't do any of that in the actual event itself. But is that going to make you a better human? Is that going to add some longevity to your posture and the way you move and that way you feel with your movement? Right. And the answer is yeah, because like the things that you are going to do in life are going to be weird, right? You are going to bend over to pick up things randomly. You're going to try to help to someone move and pick up a couch. You're going to grab your kid in a weird position. You're going to hold your kid in one arm, which is the next one for me, which is unilateral, which is why it's such a big part to our programming here and my programming in general is like, I like unilateral training better than bilateral training. But from a force production, from a power development, from a speed development, from a strength development, bilateral and even hypertrophy, I would say, bilateral movements are going to be better. Why? Because they add a degree of stability, right? And that stability allows us to produce more force through a transfer of energy. So from a muscle building standpoint or a sport development standpoint, yeah, it's great. But think about unilateral. All sports are single leg, single arm, single sided to some degree. All of life is single leg, single arm, single sided to a degree, right? Like I train in my career, I've trained a lot of moms that from post pregnancy that are like, I have like this bicep tendonitis, or even parents, the dads too. And a lot of it is just like, oh, I'm always holding my kid on one side, right? Or I'm always working on my phone on one side. So it's like we create these asymmetries, right? And I think those asymmetries need to be exposed because when you can expose yourself through training, your body has a degree of adaptation already, right? So you're not just getting shell shocked every single time that you go through that exposure in real life. And like I said in the beginning, even like the sports specific training or mobility specific training, there is nothing better than the thing itself to be better at the thing, right? So there's never going to be a perfect program for whatever outcome. It's like the outcome is the thing that you're doing is going to make you better at the thing that you're trying to be better at, right? So that's a huge part, right? As I think about multi-directional movements, I think about unilateral training, I think about breathing mechanics, I think about gait. But then I look at like another big one for me, which I think from like all cause mortality, I think about health, I think about obviously majority of all sports. I think about weight loss. I think about being lean. I would put those things in a category that I think every single person on this planet has probably one of those goals, if not all of those goals. And that is built on a foundation of aerobic base, right? Like having a degree of conditioning and aerobic training should be a foundation to everyone's life and everyone's training program. And it doesn't matter if you're a bodybuilder trying to get leaner, right? Or stay healthier because you don't want to die young, like unfortunately most of them do. And that's the degree of drug abuse, but also the lifestyle. It doesn't matter if it's getting ready for a high rocks competition or a marathon or a triathlon or an ultra or things like that. Obviously, that's part of the sport, and having a good aerobic base is the only thing that's going to make you good at that. But also, and I think for most people that are just like, hey, I just want to be leaner. I want to lose some weight. I want to be healthier. I want to live a long time. I want to feel good. Like those are all things that come from a foundation of like, you got to have training. You got to have conditioning. You got to have an aerobic base. And so for me, it's like that's a universal layer of training. That's a universal layer of functionality. So it's like when I think about functional training, anybody that says functional training is bullshit, I'm like, you're basically just saying that these things that are universal are bullshit. And that's where I can say, like, I can look anybody eye to eye that would argue that and be like, do you really think that this is deemed as something that's stupid? And I would assume that anybody that's smart that doesn't have ego would be like, yeah, of course. Like those are things that should be there. Right. And I'm like, well, by definition, that's functional, right? Like that's functional because it's improving those things. So those are, I'm sure I can go on if I try to dive deeper into this, but like those are like the first things that come to my mind of like what makes something more functional, right? So when it comes to picking training, right? For anybody that's obviously a member listening to this, you're already getting your, I guess, your functional training is already being delivered to you through our programming, right? If you're someone that's a listener that's not a member currently at Functional Lifestyles that's interested in this stuff, like when I say I think functional training is still the best, I do like to be clear that your function, your goal, your outcome will dictate the function itself, right? And that's where I think functional training or functional, the word itself, can lose a degree of its kind of value, right? It's like, well, does that make it like not even worth saying if that point of like anything that people are training for by definition is functional? I'm like, well, yes and no, right? But I do like to be clear on that. Like, I think it's important for you to understand that like your outcome will dictate the function of that training, right? Because like it's funny because like even in the health space, right? Like in the like I don't know, some people I'm sure have heard of this, but like there's functional medicine doctors, right? What's the difference between a functional medicine doctor and then your traditional kind of doctor that you would go to? A functional medicine doctor is going to find ways to be more holistic, right? So instead of prescribing medication right away, they might go through like, what are some lifestyle factors that we can change? Can I change the way your diet looks? Can I change the way your training looks? Can I increase the amount of steps you're taking a day? Can I do things to improve your sleep quality and quantity? Can I do things to reduce stress first? And if I can do those things at the core holistically, maybe we don't need medication yet, or maybe we don't need as much medication or whatever, as many things to take. So I've always kind of been on that boat in that camp of like, I would prefer to use a functional medicine doctor when it comes to using a doctor, period, versus your traditional practice. And that's just because I like the holistic approach. And I think about that with training too. Like, and I don't mean any harm when I say this to anybody in this space, because I think we're all in the same kind of objective and camp and thing that we're trying to solve for. But when I think about, there's funny because like I know people that are like physical therapists or ATCs, things like that, and they kind of think like chiropractors are kind of bullshit. One of my favorite people I've ever worked with in my entire career as a client and athlete was Dr. Justin Brink, and he lives in Idaho now. And if you're listening to this, just see this clip. Shout out to Brink because he was just an OG and everything. But he was a chiropractor by definition when I looked him up and when I found him. But his approach to things was different than everyone else that I saw, because everyone else was like this old school Western practice of like manual adjustment to the spine. I'll see you 2, 3, 4 times a week, and let's just keep doing that. And of course, you would get this immediate relief, and then you would just be back in pain. And Justin, he was like, hey, if I do my job correctly, you shouldn't be coming to me all that often, right? And I'm like, okay, light bulb. Yes, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is someone that's saying like, hey, through movement, through training, through these things that I'm going to give you on the corrective side of whatever exercise or programming I give you, these things should be the things that adjust the way your alignment is and your skeletal system is. Because think about it this way. Your skeletal system is moved by your muscular system. Your muscular system is controlled by your nervous system. And these things are obviously interlinked, right? Like there is a connection and a pathway between those three systems. So if you think about your skeletal system being off, like people think like, oh, I just need to adjust my back, or I need someone to crack my back or crack my neck. It's like, understand that there's a reason why that's there, right? So for me, it's funny when I think about training, I kind of always use my kind of experience with Justin Brink was like, okay, if he's using training as the thing to fix me instead of chiropractic work, and he still did adjustments, he still did soft tissue, is there a way that I can get people out of that world, right? Where they don't need to go to a physical therapist, they don't need to go to a massage therapist, they don't need to rely on a chiropractor. And here's something I want to be very clear on. I think those things will always have a place and time in life for everyone, right? Because there's going to be some things that like you just can't control, right? Like I was just in Tahoe last week and I was mountain biking, and I had a run where I coming off a ramp and landed weird right over my handlebars, landed on my wrist and my shoulder a little weird. Not super serious, but just one of those things where I'm like, like it would have been nice to have a little body work done, right? And for me, like I said, I want to be clear that like I always think that like I send people a lot to those type of things: massage therapy, physical therapy, chiropractic work, acupuncture, like whatever under that umbrella. But I do like to be kind of transparent that I do tell people like the goal is not to rely on those people, right? Like it's like the same kind of methodology or thought process for me on like doctors. It's like I never want my message to be like doctors are stupid, the medical system is stupid, like don't go to these type of things. My message is more of like, how do we avoid using these other ancillary services or things around us throughout our lifestyle, right? And I think our training can do things like that. And let me be clear. My workouts have sent me to go see a massage therapist. My workouts have sent me to a physical therapist or an acupuncture or a chiropractor before, and I say that it was the way that I was training that put me in this camp of performance or whatever I was training at such a high level that I was doing it for other reasons. Now for me, it's like, I always say this, like the reason why I don't do back squats a lot, or I don't deadlift a lot, the reason why I don't lift super heavy, the reason why I don't do 1 rep maxes, or even I would say even 3 rep maxes anymore, is because for me personally, that that type of training and that philosophy, that approach doesn't give me any ROI for what I'm looking for with my life. My quote unquote function that I am trying to get is I want to have enough muscle to look a certain way. I want to have enough strength to be able to, hey, I want to go mountain biking. I was wake surfing last week. And if I go play golf or we have our sporting event, I want to be able to play flag football and soccer. I want to be able to, not only want to be able to keep up, I want to be competitive, right? Like, I think about that when people ask me all the time of like, oh, would you do high rocks with us? Would you do these competitions? I don't want to be performative. I want to be performance based, right? Like I want to go do something to win. And that's just my mindset. So I like my training to support those things. I don't have any ego tied towards like, I need to be able to deadlift this. Like when people like, I would say every single coach, we have 16 or 17 now here between both locations. I would say all of them, probably 90+% of them are stronger than me in most things in the gym. Right. And young Corey would be really like pissed off about that. If like, oh, I want to be stronger. But like, I never really made that a part of my training, a little bit through CrossFit. But I was always more on like how you looked, and aesthetics was always kind of my big outcome. And I still feel confident that I look pretty good and I can hold my own when it comes to like body, aesthetics and things like that. But it's funny because like that's the balancing act that I think we all have to take with training is like, like there is this goal, this outcome of like what is true alignment for you as far as your outcome of training. That is the function, right? That's the function that we're trying to serve for. Then there's ego that's obviously always going to be attached to things. And like when I was in CrossFit, we used to always see that like, we were just talking about this yesterday, actually, in Paul Otto. We were joking around that, like, one of the clients, and he's an older guy, he's like, one of the things I think the classes don't work well for me is, like, I get too competitive. And I'm like, that's a pretty common thing. Like, I see that, and that's where you're training with a lot more ego. And that can get you in trouble because ego is one of those things that obviously is a strong driver. Like, ego is what I felt like always made me successful in a lot of things because, like, I did have this extra layer of motivation that always kind of gave me this drive. But the reality of it, when I think about my training to answer the question that I brought up, it's like, it doesn't serve the purpose. For me, like heavy deadlifts is like, it's cool. It feels good to lift heavy weight. But it makes me worse at golf. And I enjoy golf. I love golf. Like it doesn't make me better at snowboarding, right? Like I need to be able to rotate. I need to be able to go on one leg, one arm. I need to be good on like these asymmetrical, multi-directional type of movements because my lifestyle and my outcome of what I'm trying to get towards for that lifestyle, that kind of gives me back to square one, right? So that's like one of many examples, right? I always like to be clear that like this open-minded approach to training is what's going to deem functional training for you, right? So just understand function it's serving an outcome, right? And whatever that outcome means or is to you, whatever that goal is, but the dots, the two kind of spaces between this dot, that is the functional training that you are doing. And that functional training can look different for a lot of people. Right. But with the universal layers that I brought up earlier, those are the things that I think will benefit every single human that is listening to this, that is in the gym training. And like, there are things that I think are parallels that should just be foundational to everyone's life. And those are the things that I always say, that's what makes functional training great. Because if you're skipping those things, I don't care who you are, it's not serving a better purpose for your life, right? It's not serving a better purpose for your sport or your events or whatever it might be, right? All right, guys. Well, hope you got some good little nuggets as always, and share this with somebody that you think is functional training is bullshit because they need to hear it too. See you.